elite group, and I'm very pumped to have Todd on here because he's accomplished some things that I have yet to accomplish in my life, and I'm looking forward to accomplishing. And Todd's a hell of a guy, man. He owns a company, a platform. He is the creator and head coach of a system called Win by Noon, which I know a lot of loan officers, realtors, financial professionals use in order to get their kind of life and their day and their system effectively done and over and winning the day by noon. Todd's also done something that's super, super rare in the finance industry is he built a real team of professionals who then he could step away, still run the sales side of that team, still make revenue off of all of his work that he put into a previous industry, and now has moved on and is crushing it in yet another industry, which is coaching and your journal. So Todd, first of all, thank you for being on, and tell me what I missed in the 60-second bio intro there.
That was perfect. I'm so excited to be here, Scott. Thanks for having me be part of your community. And that was a pretty good summary of me and my current life. Other than married for 30 years, dad of 3 daughters, and having a blast.
That's awesome, man. So I want to jump right in. And by the way, there's some people already watching this live on Facebook. So if you're watching this, can you do me a favor? Click the like button, leave a comment, start a watch party, because Todd's going to give some awesome knowledge. And the quicker people engage on Facebook, the more people that see it, quite frankly. So Todd, give us the theory, the thesis, the guiding principle of Win by Noon. Like, how did this come to you, and what was the genesis of the company?
That's such a great question. I mean, it came to me by accident. I think like most great ideas, when I was producing, I got kind of stuck for about 3 straight years, and I was stuck at a really good level. We were doing about 400 loans a year, about $80 million, but I just couldn't seem to break through that ceiling. And like many people, I had this idea, this desire, this goal to be $100 million producer, right? Everyone wants to say, oh, I did $100 million. And I couldn't figure out what the difference was. And my frustration was, like most people, I was busy reacting to other people and other things all day. And, I had a business development manager, and I had a business partner, and I had a loan officer assistant, and I worked with my wife, and they all had access to my calendar, and they would schedule things for me whenever it made the most sense for them. And what I found is like 80% of the rest of the world, that I got most stuff done in the morning when my brain was fresh, where I was full of energy and super focused, and ultimately said, gosh, you know what? I'm just going to block my calendar every day till 11:30 and make sure that I have no appointments. And then I just create a simple script for myself. Hey, I've got a commitment at that time. It was really rare that someone would push me if I said, hey, I got a commitment at that time. Can we chat at 1? They'd say, sure, Todd. And it was really rare that it was something that was so critical or urgent that I needed to do it before I got those most critical activities done. And all of a sudden, hindsight's 20, looking in hindsight's 2020. All of a sudden that year, went from averaging about 400 loans to closing over 550 and, closed over 113 million that year. And that one change that I made, the market in Phoenix, Arizona, where my team operated, was the same real estate wise. We had the same real estate teams. It was just, I was converting more effectively because I actually got all my lead calls done. I was communicating better because I actually was scheduled the time to actually make the calls, and ultimately got more referrals and had a higher conversion rate. And with the same amount of lead and relationships, was able to actually increase my business. And so afterwards, when I became a coach and had stepped away from that chair, and I was coaching really kind of a lot of up and comers, some really top producers that you guys would know the names of, CEO of a small independent, I was telling a story because this guy's like, coach, just tell me what you did. Tell me what I should do. And finally, when we looked at it, I walked through my day, and he's like, oh, you kind of won by noon. And I thought, you know what? I did. And he's like, if you could help me create that and come up with a way to track it, which became the planner, then he says, I think I could do the same thing too. And so long story short, I blocked my day till 11:30. Win by noon sounds way cooler than that. And what I found was no different than most people. I used to wake up with really great intentions, a good to-do list and things I wanted to get done. And I'd get to the end of the day and say, oh, shoot, I didn't get to it. And it wasn't that I was a bad person or it wasn't important to do those things. It was just that other distractions got in the way. And so, my philosophy is figure out what it is you want to do in a day. Like, what are those activities that you need to do in order to get to your goals at the end of the year? Break it down to today, make a commitment to do that, put it into your calendar, set your intentions, and then just block out all those other distractions, and hopefully be off to the races. There's no perfect formula for it. There's no perfect day, but I think people who set their mind to it and move themselves slightly more forward are going to grow. And for most people, it doesn't even take till noon. It just typically takes, 45 minutes to a couple hours if you're super busy.
So I want to talk about that a little bit more, because I think people will say, "Oh, well, yeah, Todd, you figured it out. That's fine." Everybody has their excuses or their limiting beliefs or whatever we want to call it. Was it really that easy, just like booking everything out from 8:30 to 11:30? Hey, I really don't talk to anybody. I don't take any of these calls. You and I work in an industry. A lot of people work in an industry. A lot of people have gotten used to that Amazon generation who wants it right now. One click, I get the button, it's done. Immediacy demand. So how did you start doing that, and how have you stayed committing to that? Of like, no. This is my time. This, whatever it is, 5:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. or 8 to noon or whatnot. This is my time, and this is the stuff I need to do to be successful. Like, how have you interrupted the interruptions and got rid of the distractions and all that kind of craziness?
Well, I'm like borderline ADD, right? I mean, some people think I am, and the tests show that I'm right on the edge. And so, I'm super distracted. Like, oh, look, there's a bird. Like, that's just me. It's really easy for me to get sucked into something. And I tend to find that it's, for me, it started at 8:30 because that's exactly the moment I dropped my daughter off at school. I couldn't drop her off at 8:28, couldn't drop her off at 8:29. So 8:30 was my magic time. And I hid for the first couple of months that I did it. I literally hid out. I went to a burrito shop and had a breakfast burrito while I made my calls, or I went to, there's 2 coffee locations and a couple of restaurants, kitty corner from my old office. And I hid out because that way no one could interrupt me. And I was just focused on that outbound dialing, right? My lead calls, I was following up on applications who had to return their documentation so we get into a pre-approval. And then I'm a big believer in target day activities, like many coaches are, many coaching programs, right? Calling all your loans and updating them on a certain day, and calling all your pre-approved clients on a certain day, and calling realtors on a certain day. And so what this allowed me to do by sitting there and hiding and just doing those outbound calls, I was able to get those calls done. And once they were done, guess what? I could pack it back up and I could go in the office and get work done. And then eventually my team caught on. They saw that I was super productive. And then I was able just to do what I do now. I mean, my office just has a do not disturb sign on it. And guess what? People actually follow the do not disturb sign because they know that when I was, doing the loans, that was helping their paycheck, right? Their team members. And they just knew, unless it was a super emergency, that they wouldn't disrupt me. And of course, my wife would disrupt me because she's my wife. And also, I wasn't so pigheaded. If a great opportunity came up, if someone had a real estate team meeting and I was going to get invited to speak to them, or the brokerage, well, guess what? I wasn't going to ask them to change their weekly meeting time so it would work for me. If I thought it was a good enough opportunity, I would show up and I would do it. If, when we were going after a home builder for 3.5 years, when they said, hey, can you meet with the CEO of the home building company at 10 o'clock on Thursday, I didn't say, oh gosh, I got a commitment at time. I'm like, absolutely, I'm all in. And so you also have to make those judgments, but I tend to find oftentimes we allow things to come into our world that we shouldn't, right? You get what you tolerate. And so if you let, your agent call you, who's going to talk to you about, hey, did you hear what's going on with, basketball, NBA going back? You think, maybe you fool yourself to think, oh, they're calling me with a lead, but they're probably not. They're calling you to check on an appraisal. They're calling you to shoot the breeze about something going on with COVID. And instead, if you become proactive about it, and you have to tell people what you're doing, right? I didn't tell everyone at first what I was doing. That's why my team was wondering, well, where's Todd every day? But then slowly but surely, I'm like, yeah, here's what I'm doing. And they caught on. And so for me, it was just blocking out the distractions. I know other people. I mean, a lot of people know Josh Metal. He runs a big team. They did $300 or $400 million last year. I mean, his team lead generates every day from 9 to 11, and they're at their desks. Well, now they're at home. But even during that time, even during COVID, all their phones are forwarded to the receptionist. So during that time, they're blocking themselves so that no one can reach them directly. The only way they get back through to the loan officer is if the client says, oh, hey, I just missed Todd's call, then they would put them through, or if it's one of their top 5 real estate agents, they'll put them through. Everyone else goes to the receptionist, and then she schedules it for a time once that lead generation time is done. And that's the kind of commitment I'm talking about, is how do you protect yourself? And in their case, that's what they do. They're not on Facebook during that time. If there's some great webinar on at that time, guess what? They're going to watch the recording later versus give up what's most important, which is that proactive time. And then I say, you got to kind of take it a step further. What I also started to do was I started recording those activities. So I started figuring out, well, how many lead calls do I have to make today in order to get, a lead to talk to me and once I talk to a lead, and then to get an application, and then how do I get them, what percentage get pre-qualified? Because at least in Arizona where I did loans, not everyone actually qualifies. They don't all work for Amazon or Microsoft or, some crazy big company. So there was, seeing what that percentage was to ultimately say, gosh, how many times do I have to pick up the phone this week if I want to close 400 transactions in the year, and really back that down to know exactly what activity I needed to do in order to create the result I was after.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think your idea of knowing your metrics is so relevant to any business, right? Like, we're going to be interviewing a divorce attorney here in a couple weeks who hates divorces. She's like, if I could magically wave a wand and make every couple solve their own problem, which many of them do, I would recommend against divorce, right? But she knows she has to have X amount of consults, to have X amount of people follow through with the divorce, to have X amount of revenue, to live the lifestyle that she wants. And she just knows her metrics. So talk through somebody, and it could be in any industry actually, talk through this idea of like knowing your numbers, right? Like, obviously you sat there and you mapped it out and you're like, okay, I'm making this much money, I'm making this many calls. Can you talk a little bit about the thought process behind when you first started to discover that like, oh yeah, there is a metric for this many calls, for this many answers, for this many deals, for this much to turn into this revenue? I think that's something that people know they should be doing, but a lot of business owners are not doing that.
100%. And it's so interesting because right now, if you're a loan officer in a refinance world, you don't really have to, your metrics are different than they were, 120 days ago. But ultimately, if you don't really know, if you're not recording the activity, and you have a goal, you're only going to get there by either killing yourself or by dumb luck, right? I mean, that's oftentimes it's that whole idea of, definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I tended to find that when I started doing coaching, that a lot of loan officers could tell me what their application to close ratio was. So they're like, oh, well, I'm going to need to have, 100 applications to close my 50 transactions this year. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, that's a great place to start. I threw in the pre-qualification again, as I said, because I don't think people understood that there was the hump, because it doesn't really matter if you get an application if you don't actually get the pre-qual letter issued so they can go shopping. And then I'd say, well, gosh, can you figure out your leads? And most people can get applications to close because it's in your CRM, right? It's in your LOS if you're a loan officer. Most people think they can get their leads to applications, but they can't, right? You have to actually make sure that all the leads get into your CRM, because that's normally where you're going to check that off. And then that's great too. If you know, hey, well, gosh, I need to have 4 leads to get 2 applications to get 1 close. I'm closing 25% of my leads. That's awesome. Then I like the idea of saying, well, gosh, how many calls would I have to make? And again, it came down to, I had one of my team members, because my team has tracked all of these metrics since about 2013. Early 2014. And one of the team members said, well, this is awesome. He basically want to know how much money am I making every time I make a phone call? And I thought, all right, that's really cool, because he kind of got it. He just said, gosh, if I'm going to close my number of transactions, let me just bring it down to the call. And ultimately in the end, the law of averages kicks in. It also tells you when the market's changing, right? As people went from, a purchase market in the first quarter to this crazy refinance market to, eventually what'll eventually be a normal, well, who knows what the new normal will be, a normal purchase market of some sort again. But it's just great to always know. It's a great way to see how am I doing from a metrics perspective. Again, like you said, regardless of business, I love hearing that a divorce attorney is doing that. But wouldn't it be nice to know if all of a sudden, you thought you had to make 25 phone calls to get a closed transaction, and all of a sudden, last month you made 100 phone calls and you didn't get 4 transactions? That's your light bulb that something is changing within the market for me. And so maybe that means, okay, I only closed 3 transactions. So now I'm getting 33 calls to 1 closed transaction. So if I want to close 4 next month, then I better start calling 133 people. I think it's just a way to monitor your activity, monitor your relationships, monitor your market, and figure out what you're doing. And it's just a choice. It sounds like a chore, but it's really a choice. It's a choice to say, I'm going to go in and be super intentional and figure out what it's going to take for me to get there. And you can do it with hours dialing too versus number of calls. So a lot of the real estate teams that use Win by Noon and that I've coached are on the dialer for, an hour to 3 hours in the morning. I've sat in a real estate office for 90 days with a real estate team that was high performing, that made those calls. And again, they knew what it was. They're all numbers focused. I tend to find that the top producers are numbers focused, and the people who want to be top producers who are struggling, that's one of the big gaps, is that they don't actually know what they need to do to be successful. And Win by Noon's a pretty inexpensive, simple tool to do that.
Yeah. And, I want to shift a little bit over to, talking to some of the realtors that are in the group, because I know you coach a lot of realtors too. I feel like there's something about your mindset or your personality where you've really flipped that switch from like, oh, well, I have to do my lead generation in the morning to I get to do my lead generation in the morning. And it's just a simple verbiage change, but I feel like in your mind, you're like, oh yeah, well, now that I have the system and I have the journal, I get to do all this stuff in the morning and be wildly successful. And then like by noon, if I kind of screw up the rest of the day, it's okay. So I want to talk a little bit about that, change of mindset. I get to do my lead generation to where I have to do my lead generation. And then the other thing I want to talk about, and again, this is a word choice and this is a mindset choice that I think you have. I feel like you could have very easily said like, well, I can either be running a top producing loan officer team or I can go into coaching. And you took that out of your mindset. You said, no, instead of an either or, it's an and. I get to still run this great sales team of loan officers, and I get to build this new business of coaching. So can you just talk a little bit about your mindset and what it is about you that you get to do those things, right? It's you get to, and it's an and instead of an either or.
I appreciate you saying that. For me, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, right? I grew up as a kid, selling skateboards and t-shirts and, always looking to make a buck. And, I kind of view, I view this great opportunity we have in business, especially if you're wired for sales. You've got this great opportunity to go out there and make a difference. And so for me, it's, I'm a glass half full guy, right? I mean, that's just it. I believe that the glass is always half full, and I'm always looking for the way to improve things. And so it became, again, it's the gamification of things, right? It became a game for me when I knew the number of calls that I needed to make in order to close a transaction. Then it wasn't a chore. Some days it still felt like a chore, don't get me wrong. But ultimately, I had the mindset that I was going to get things done. I had a friend of mine who at the time was the number one producer in Arizona. His name was Mike Metz. And Mike was just a really solid guy. And he was the first person who said, well, if I don't have 3 applications in a day, I'm going to stay until I get them. And so he would stay at his office till 6 or 7 at night, dialing the phone to get those applications. And then he had a clicker he would click. He's like, if I don't talk to a certain number of people, I can't, I won't go in a day. But he knew if he talked to a certain number of people every day, he would get there. And that's what I call quality conversations. And he was the first person I talked to who was just so committed to what those activities were. And it's the same way that I became as I became super committed to it. So that's when it no longer became a chore, it became an opportunity. And then, I, without boring with people with too much details, I was a client of, still am, of Building Champions. And I've been a client for about 12 and a half years. And I've had some great coaches there. Bill Hart, who a lot of you know, in his book is right there on my bookshelf. White Collar Warrior. Bill was my coach for 4 years. He's still a dear friend. And I created a group coaching program for them. And long story short, I was coaching within our company, and our company sold. And then I couldn't coach anymore because they didn't want someone who was producing to be a coach for them. And so I had that killer year where I kind of hit that goal, and the opportunity was offered to me to become a full-time coach for them, but then leaving my team behind. And my team was in good hands. My wife and a business partner run the team, and we were doing 100 million at the time, still keeping on track. And they kind of gave me this gift to follow my passion of coaching, and went down that path, and really had prepared the team. The team, we had great systems. We had great team members, still have those great team members, still have those great systems, and continue to adapt it so that I didn't have to be part of it every day, which, was a huge blessing and a gift. And, here we are 4 years later now, and, the team is still thriving and, and crushing it. And, I'm training my brother-in-law right now. So I'm dug in a little bit, helping him and, doing some stuff with the team as they're so busy. But I view that as a gift as well, and this great opportunity. But I tend to find that most people haven't really thought, how do I create a business that can truly run without me? And ironically, when I was a coach, that was what a lot of people were seeking me out for, was how do I build a team like you built so that someday, I can walk away from it. And it's, a unique thing where I'm following my passion with Win by Noon. As I mentioned, as a coach, there's when kind of Win by Noon was born, and Building Champions has been graceful. They supported me. And, I left the organization about a little over a year ago to pursue Win by Noon full time. But I'm still a client, a big fan, if that answered your question or not, hopefully.
Yeah, no, and I'd love to hear that, because I think a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, loan officers, realtors, they conceptualize this idea of like, okay, to grow, I've got to go from me doing it to we doing it to eventually they do it, and you really start to be the leader and the business owner and the strategic planner. And when I look at Win by Noon, I see that you guys are just adding categories, right? So now you have a Win by Noon for loan officers, Win by Noon for real estate agent, Win by Noon for executives and insurance agents. Now that you're the business owner and you're the one that's running the strategy, like what are your Win by Noon categories? Like I know the loan officers, the realtors, we've got to make our dials every day. We got to connect with people and have quality conversations. But now that you're basically the business owner and the strategist, for lack of a better term, like what are your personal activities that you're getting knocked out every day by noon to make sure that, your business is a success?
For me, it's primarily on time. It's actually working on the business. So right now it's really looking at, we've got some new products in development. We've got an app that's been the thorn in our side for the past year and a half, and just some initiatives that we have. And so it's really scheduling that time to think. Keith Cunningham, who wrote the book, The Road Less Stupid, talks about thinking time. It's so important that we create that time to think. I'm studying, I'm learning during that time. And then, I am making sales calls during that time for Win by Noon to set up speaking engagements, to, set up webinars where I'm, jumping on with real estate companies or mortgage companies to talk to their sales force about how to be more productive. And so I've got this unique opportunity that I get to continue to teach and coach and be passionate about what I like. And then the afternoons for me is just reacting. And then that's when I'm setting up coaching calls. And that's when I'm setting up, follow-ups with people who say, hey, I'm stuck on this with Win by Noon, can you help me? And so it's really the whole idea of whatever my focus is that week is what I'm going to focus on. And then the rest of the day is the reacting time. So I think it's the whole idea of just splitting your day into two parts, right? What is most important for me, regardless of what industry and regardless of what I'm in business with? Like, what do I need to do first that I can go to bed at night feeling really good that I accomplished my most important priorities by getting those done. And then later on in the day, I can do all the reacting. So for me as a loan officer, right, morning was on the phones, afternoon was driving around meeting realtors or meeting with clients, right? If you're a real estate agent, morning, right, make the calls, follow up on offers, set up the home inspections, and then in the afternoon, go out and show properties and do all the other things that you need to do as well. And I think that's applicable to a lot of businesses, just like we heard, a divorce attorney, right? She knows what her numbers are and what that looks like.
That's awesome. I was actually just responding to a couple of questions here that we have in the Facebook feed. And of course, they're asking, where can I get the journal? What's the journal? It's winbynoon.com. And what about on the personal side, Todd? Like, what are some stuff? I mean, are you one of these guys that has to spend 3 hours every morning working out, meditation? Is that like the only way to be successful? But what are you doing on a personal side other than business to kind of attack your day in the morning?
It's funny. I'm a big morning routine guy. I love talking and teaching morning routines. I'm a wake up early, meditate, stretch, push-ups, sit-ups, workout, read something to learn, read something spiritual. Those are typically the majority, almost all of those, if not all of those, on a daily period. And it's kind of funny. I'm only laughing when you say it because in the COVID world, I've been sleeping in more. I laugh because now I used to get up between 4 and 4:30 every day because I had to get to the gym. And then I stopped going to the gym. I've been running or walking instead. And so now I'm getting up a little bit later. I laugh because I haven't set an alarm except for the last 3 days. I haven't set an alarm all through COVID. So I've just been getting up whenever I get up. It could be 5:30, could be 6:10. And, but what was happening is then my morning routine was getting compressed. And so now I'm going back to, I've been getting up at 5:15, setting my alarm. I'm kind of a nerd. I've got one of those Aura rings. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's kind of a nerdy ring that tracks all your sleep and your body temperature and your activity. And so I really care about my sleep as, first and foremost. And during quarantine, having two of my college age children back at home who aren't normally there. Guess what? We're staying up later. So I've been wanting to sleep in later, but I'm a big believer in having a morning routine. I actually think you should get up at the same time every day, regardless of what's going on. And what I'm really finding for me, meditation made a huge difference. My mind is always thinking, and it's really helped me be able to kind of relax kind of a notch, right? Really sets my perspective for the day. Just 10 minutes. I use Headspace, that app. And there's some other great resources out there that I have friends who use. And then really the whole idea of learning. That was the other thing that was what I was giving up in during this time, is I was giving up on the reading a book to learn something or studying something. And I just think that that's such a great opportunity now. If you've got time, right, you're getting the gift of not driving to your office, saving a half an hour, sometimes an hour a day. Why not take that and turn that into learning something new, whether it's, becoming more productive, whether it's, how to make your own face mask at home. That's my daughter's thing today. I just printed out before I got on this call. She's like, Dad, can you print those whatever templates out? She's making face masks for the family. Whatever it is, it's a great time to actually learn. How about you? Do you have a great morning routine?
I claim to, but it tends to be a little bit more disjointed than I like. I do love your idea of the on time and the thinking time. I find myself doing that over cigars, which is probably not the best for my health, but like some days, most days, the thing I look most forward to is like going for like a 3 or 4 mile walk over the course of an hour. I'll smoke a cigar when I'm walking. I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll just take verbal notes on stuff that I'm working on and ideas that are coming to mind. So yeah, I get my meditation in a less healthy way when I'm smoking cigars, but it's the same thought process, right? It's like, I think everybody needs that time to unwind, unplug, get away from this computer thing that you're watching us on, and have just a different train of thought. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of your journal. I'm a big fan of all the coaching that you've been doing. Give us one last thought for those people that are like, oh, Todd, I bought your journal, but I've got it over here in the box. And I believe in what Scott's saying, but like, as soon as we get off this webinar, I'm back to email and I'm sucked into the abyss of working in my business instead of on my business. So kind of leave us with your last best tip to actually turn this stuff into a daily habit. Maybe we all don't have a ball busting manager who's going to make us sit there from 9 to 11 to do our lead generation, and we've got to do it ourselves. So what's your best tip for people to get started and then stay on track with that consistency?
The best tip to get started is just start doing it. Make a commitment. Don't say, I'm going to start it tomorrow. Start it today, regardless of what time zone you're in, whether it's midday or the end of the day. Just say, gosh, I'm going to start recording my activities now. You don't need to win by noon to do it. You're just looking at, go online, look at YouTube at my trainings. You can see the things in there that we record and how the activities work. It's just really looking at your day. I think that people make the excuses, I'm too busy. And I actually think when you're the busiest, it's when it matters the most. What I'm finding is so many people have reached out to me and said, gosh, Todd, I just resubscribed. I wasn't using it, and I realized now I need it more than ever. And I went from doing, 2 transactions a month to 4, or, whatever the number was. And so I've just been really encouraging people just to start doing it. If you really are serious about it, right? If don't have your goal be a wish or a dream, have it be a goal that you're going to achieve, and figure out what are the activities you need to get there. You're going to mess up, right? I still mess up. You don't wake up every day and do the perfect morning routine. Guess what? You have tomorrow. You can try again tomorrow. And I'm not a big believer in the word try, but that's just what you do. And so I would just say, get something, start planning, set a goal, be intentional about it, and then do your best today to do it. And then tomorrow, do the same thing and repeat. And eventually that's how it becomes a habit. Don't be too hard on yourself. You know what? It's been such a crazy time, but I do know that especially when people are all working at home, it's so much harder to be focused, and the need to wake up, look at your day, be intentional about it, manage by your calendar and what you want to do. Don't manage by email and text and calls and who's screaming the loudest. Figure out what you want to do and get it done. It's not as hard as you think if you are committed to getting it done.
So don't disappear into the abyss of email at 6 a.m. in the morning and then pop your head up at 6 p.m. and be like, I didn't get anything done. That's not a good
plan. That's it, right? Because that's all it is all that stuff is important too. I always say, gosh, don't hear me thinking that that's not important, right? There are certain things you have to do in order to be successful at business. I'm just saying, gosh, do you have to do it? Do you have to be doing it from 8 to 9? From 8 to 9, can you do your proactive activities? And then at 9 o'clock, jump into your email. Because once you do, you just said it, you're not getting out. And so why not just why not just wait? There are some superhumans out there who get in their email, then put a pin in it, do their activities, and then get back to their email. But most people, that's, they're off to the races and they're not getting it done.
That's
and
tough.
myself too. I mean, that's just, I have to be really careful with myself. I created this and I talk about it so much to keep myself from falling back in that hole that I've been in the past.
Oh yeah. I mean, everything that I've done that's of relevance to other people, spoiler alert, I really just did it to solve my own problem. Like, there's no magic bullet here that Todd and I have. It's just like, we identified the fact that we have a problem, and now we created systems to hopefully fix them and mitigate them. So Todd, I'm going to be in Arizona very soon here, and we've got to get together for a beer. So I will let you know when I'm in town. And thanks so much, man. Like, I know your time is super valuable, and I appreciate you just taking time out of your day to give back to this group. It means a lot.
Totally my pleasure. I look forward to meeting you live in person here in town. And thanks all for watching. If I can do anything to help any of you become more productive or have a little more fun, reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
And I've got a few people that run real estate offices and mortgage teams that might want to get in touch with you about presenting and getting a copy of your journal. What's the easiest way to get in touch with you? Because I know you're running a couple different businesses.
I would say the best is always email, todd@winbynoon.com. You can reach out to me on social, but you guessed it, I'm not really that plugged into Facebook right now. I probably need to be. I know that's it. I actually need to be intentional and schedule some time for that. But I'm a little slower there. I'm definitely better on email because I do clear email at least once a day.
Perfect. Well, we'll be in touch, man, and I'll see you in Arizona probably in about a month. I got to get out of my house. I'm going a little stir crazy, so I'll find an excuse to get up there for a beer.
We look forward to it.
All right. Talk soon, Todd.